Anarchism. Chapter 1 Introduction, Ideology and Ideologies. Preview. All people are political thinkers, whether they know it or not. People use political ideas and concepts whenever they express their opinion or speak their mind. Every day, language is littered with terms such as freedom, fairness, equality, justice, and rights in the same way. Words such as conservative, liberal, socialist, communist, and fascist are regularly employed by people either to describe their own views or those of others. However, even though such terms are familiar, even commonplaces, they are seldom used with any precision or clear grasp of their meaning. What, for instance, is equality? What does it mean to say that all people are equal? Are people born equal? Should they be treated by society as if they are equal? Should people have equal rights, equal opportunities, equal political influence, equal wages? Similarly, words such as socialist or fascist are commonly misused. What does it mean to call someone a fascist? What values or beliefs do fascists hold? And why do they hold them? How do socialist views differ from those of, say, liberals, conservatives, or anarchists? This book examines the substantive ideas and beliefs of the major political ideologies. This introductory chapter considers the role of ideas in politics, the life of sometimes convoluted times of the concept of ideology, the nature of structure of ideological thought, and the changing landscape of political ideologies. In the process, it reflects on issues such as why and when a body of political thought should be classified as an ideology, as well as what this implies and on whether there is an evidence that so-called new ideologies are in the process of displacing the classical ideologies. The role of ideas. Not all political thinkers have accepted the ideas and ideologies are of much importance. Politics has sometimes been thought to be little more than a naked struggle for power. If this is true, political ideas are mere propaganda, a form of words or collection of slogans designed to win votes or attract popular support. Ideas and ideologies are therefore simply window dressing used to conceal the deeper realities of political life. This is certainly a position supported by behaviorism, the school of psychology that holds that human beings are little more than biological machines, conditioned to act bracket, or more correctly react bracket close, to external stimuli. The thinking subject, together with his or her ideas, values, feelings, and intentions, is simply an irrelevance. A very similar view also informed dialectical materialism, the crude form of the Marxism that dominated intellectual inquiry in the Soviet Union and the other orthodox communist states. This held that political ideas could not only be understood in the light for the economic or class interest of those who express them. Ideas have a material basis, they have no meaning or significance on their own. The opposite argument has also been put. The UK economist John Maynard Keynes, born in 1983, died in 1946, for example, argued that the world is ruled by little other than the ideas of economic theorists and political philosophers. As he put it in the closing pages of the General Theory, the page, practical men who believe themselves to be quite exempt from any intellectual influences are usually the slaves of some defunct economist. Madmen in authority who hear voices in the air are distilling their frenzy from some academic scribbler of a few years back. Keynes in 1936. Far from dismissing ideas as being conditioned responses to practices circumstances, the position highlights the degree to which beliefs and theories provide the wellspring of the human action. The world is ultimately ruled by academic scribblers. Such a view suggests, for instance, that modern capitalism, in important respect, developed out of the classical economics of Adam Smith and David Ricardo. born in 1772 and died in 1823. That Soviet communism was shaped significantly by the writing of Karl Marx and V.I. Lenin, and the history of Nazi Germany can only be understood by the reference to the doctrine advances in Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. In reality, both of these accounts of political life are one-sided and inadequate. Political ideas are not merely a passive reflection and vested interest of personal ambition, but have the capacity to inspire and guide political actions itself, and so can shape the material life. At the same time, political ideas do not emerge in a vacuum. They do not drop from the sky like rain. All political ideas are molded by the social and historical circumstances in which they develop and by the political ambitions they serve. Quite simply, political theories and political practices are inseparably linked. Any balanced and persuasive account of political life must therefore acknowledge the constant interplay between ideas and ideologies on the other hand, and historical and social forces on the other. Ideas and ideologies influence political life in a number of ways. They are: point number one, structure political understanding and so set goals and inspire activism. Point number two, shape the nature of the political systems. Point number three, act as a form of social cement. Points khatam. In the first place, ideologies provide a perspective or lens through which the world is understood and explained. People do not see the world as it is, but only as they expect it to be. In the other words, they see it through a veil of ingrained beliefs, opinions, and assumptions. Whether consciously or subconsciously, everyone subscribes to a set of political beliefs and values that guide their behavior and influence their conduct. Political ideas and ideologies thus set goals that inspire political activism. In this respect, politicians are subject to two very different influences. Without doubt, all the politicians want power. This forces them to pragmatic to adopt those policies and ideas that are electorally popular or win favor with powerful groups such as business or the army. However, politicians seldom seek power simply for its own sake. They also possess beliefs, values, and convictions about what to do with power when it is achieved. Second, political ideologies help to shape the nature of political systems. Systems of government vary considerably throughout the world and are always associated with particular values or principles. Absolute monarchies were based on deeply established religious ideas, notably the divine right of kings. The political systems in most contemporary Western countries are founded on a set of limited and constitutional government and believe that the government should be representative based on regular and competitive elections. In the same way, traditional communist political systems conformed to the principle of Marxism-Leninism. Even the fact that the world is divided into a collection of nation states and that government power is usually located at the national level reflects the impact of political ideas, in this case of nationalism and more specifically the principle of national self-determination. Finally, the political ideas and ideologies can act as a form of social cement, providing social groups and indeed whole societies with set of unifying beliefs and values. Political ideologies have commonly been associated with particular social classes. For example, liberalism with the middle classes, conservatism with the landed aristocracy, and socialism with the working class, and so on. These ideas reflect to the life experiences, interests, and aspirations of a social class and therefore help to foster a sense of belonging and solidarity. However, ideas and ideologies can be succeeded in binding together divergent groups and classes within a society. For instance, there is a unifying bedrock of liberal democratic values in most Western states, while in Muslim countries Islam has established a common set of moral principles and beliefs. In providing society with a unified political culture, political ideas help to promote order and social stability. Nevertheless, a unifying set of political ideas and values can develop naturally within a society, or it can be enforced from above in an attempt to manufacture obedience and exercise control. The clearest example of such official ideologies have been found in fascist, communist, and religious fundamentalist regimes. Views of ideology. The book is primarily a study of political ideologies, this book, rather than an analysis of the nature of ideology. Much confusion stems for the fact that, though obviously related, ideology and ideologies are quite different things to study. To examine ideology is to consider a particular type of political thought, distinct from, say, political science or political philosophy. The study of political ideology thus involves reflection on questions about the nature, role, and significance of this category of thought, and about which set of political ideas and arguments should be classified as ideologies. For instance, is ideology true or false, liberating or oppressive, or inevitable or merely transitory? Similarly, are nationalism and multiculturalism ideologies in the same sense as liberalism and socialism? On the other hand, to study ideologies is to be concerned with analysis, the centers, the content of political thought, to be interested in the ideas, doctrine, and theories that have advanced by and within the various ideological traditions. For example, what can liberalism tell us about freedom? Why have socialists traditionally supported equality? How do anarchists defend the idea of stateless society? Why have fascists regarded struggle and war as healthy? In order to examine such content issues, however, it is necessary to consider the type of political thought we are dealing with. Before discussing the characteristic ideas and doctrine of the so-called ideologies, we need to reflect on why these set of ideas have been categorized as ideologies. More important, what does the categorization tell us? What we can learn about? For example, liberalism, socialism, feminism, and fascism from the fact that they are classified as ideologies. The first problem confronting any discussion of nature of ideology is that there is no settled or agreed definition of the terminology, a collection of rival definitions. As David McClellan, born in 1995, put it, ideology is the most elusive concept in the whole of the socialist sciences. Now, few political terms has been subject of such deep and impassioned controversy. This has occurred for two reasons. In the first place, as all concept of ideology acknowledge a link between theory and practice, the term uncovers highly contentious debates considered in the previous section about the role of ideas in politics and the relationship between beliefs and theories on the other hand, and material life or political conduct on the other hand. Second, the concept of ideology has not been able to stand apart from the ongoing struggle between and among political ideologies. For much of its history, the term ideology has been used as political weapon, a device with which to condemn or criticize rival sets of ideas or belief systems. Not until the second half of the 20th century was a neutral and apparently objective concept of ideology widely employed, and even then disagreements persisted over the social role and political significance of ideology. Among the meanings that have been attached to the ideology are the following. Point 1. A political belief system. Point 2. An action-oriented set of political ideas. Point 3. The ideas of the ruling class. Point 4. The worldview of a particular social class or social group. Point 5. Political ideas that embody or articulate class or social interest. Point 6. Ideas that propagate false consciousness among the exploited or oppressed. Point 7. Ideas that situate the individual within a social context and generate a sense of collective belonging. Point 8. An officially sanctioned set of sets used to legitimize a political system or regime. Point 9. An all-embracing political doctrine that claims a monopoly of truth. Point 10. An abstract and highly systematic set of political ideas. Points over. Now, the origins of the term are nevertheless clear. The word ideology was coined during the French Revolution by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, born in 1754, died in 1836, and was first used in public in 1796. For de Tracy, ideology referred to a new science of ideas, literally an ideology. With a rationalist zeal typical of the Enlightenment, he believed that it was possible to uncover the origins of ideas objectively and proclaimed that this new science would come to enjoy the same status as established sciences such as biology and zoology. More boldly, since all the forms of inquiry are based on ideals, de Tracy suggested that ideology would eventually come to be recognized as the queen of sciences. However, despite these high expectations, the original meaning of the term had been a little impacted on later usage, which has been influenced by both Marxist and non-Marxist thinking. Marxist views. The career of ideology as a key political term stems from the used maze of it, the writing of Karl Marx. Marx's use of the term and the interest shown in the latter generation of Marxist thinkers largely explains the prominence ideology enjoys in modern social and political thought. Yet the meaning Marx ascribed to the concept is very different from the one usually accorded it in the mainstream political analysis. Marx used the term in the title of his early work, The German Ideology, written in 1846. Written with the lifelong collaborator Friedrich Engels, born in 1820, died in 1895. This also contains Marx's clearest description of his views of ideology. A section of that book is here, and it starts as the ideas of the ruling class are in very epoch of the ruling ideas. That is, the class which is in the ruling material force of society is at the same time the ruling intellectual force. The class which has the meanings of material production as a disposal has control at the same time over the means of mental production, so that thereby, generally speaking, the ideas of those who lack the means of mental production are subjected to it. Written by Marx and Engels in his book. Now continue. Marx's concept of ideology has a number of crucial features. First, ideology is about delusion and mystification. It preparates a false or mistaken view of the world, what Engels later referred to as false consciousness. Marx used ideology as a critical concept, the purpose of which is to unmask a process of systematic mystification. His own ideas he classified as scientific, because they were designed accurately to uncover the workings of history and society. The contrast between ideology and science, between falsehood and truth, was thus vital to Marx's use of the term. Second, ideology is linked to the class system. Marx believed that the distortion implicit in ideology stems from the fact that it reflects the interests and perspective of society of the ruling class. The ruling class is unwilling to recognize itself as an oppressor, and equally it's anxious to reconcile the oppressed to their oppression. The class system is thus presented upside down, a notion Marx conveyed through the image of the camera obscura, the inverted picture that is produced by the camera lens or the human eye. Liberalism, which portrays rights that can only be exercised by the proportionate and privileged as universal entitlement, is therefore the classic example of ideology. Third, ideology is a manifestation of power. It conceals the contradiction upon which capitalism is common with all class societies is based. Ideology serves to hide from the exploited ploterist the fact of its own exploitation, thereby upholding a system of unequal class power. Ideology literally constitutes the ruling ideas of the age. Finally, Marx treated ideology as a temporary phenomenon. Ideology will only continue so long as the class system that generates it survives. The ploterist, in Marx's view, the grave digest of capitalism is destined not to establish another form of class society, but rather to abolish class inequality altogether by bringing about the collective ownership of wealth. The interests of the pluralist thus coincide with those of the society as a whole. The pluralist, in short, does not need ideology because it is the only class that need no illusions. Latter gentrifications and generations of Marxists, if anything, showed a greater interest in ideology than did Marx himself. This largely reflects the fact that Marx's confident prediction of capitalism's doom proved to be the highly optimistic, encouraging latter Marxists to focus on ideology as one of the factors explaining the unexpected resilience of the capitalist mode of production. However, important shifts in the meaning of the term also took place. In particular, all classes came to be seen to possess ideologies in what to be done. What is to be done? Name of the book. Okay. Lenin thus described the ideas of pluralist as socialist ideology or Marxist ideology, phrases that could have been absurd for Marx. For Lenin and most later Marxist ideology referred to the distinctive ideas of a particular social class, ideas that advance in interest regardless of its class position. However, as class ideas that advance its interests regardless of its class position. However, as all classes, the pluralists as well as the bourgeois has ideology, the term was robbed of its negative or pejorative connotations. Ideology no longer implied necessary falsehood and mystification, and no longer stood in contrast to science. Indeed, scientific socialism, Marxism, was recognized as a form of pluralitarian ideology. The Marxist theory of ideology was perhaps developed furthest by Antonio Gramsci. Gramsci argued that the capitalist class system is upheld not simply by unequal economic and political power, but by what is termed the hegemony of bourgeois ideas and theories. Hegemony means leadership or domination, and in the sense of ideological hegemony, it refers to the capitalist of bourgeois ideas to displace rival views and become in effect the common sense of the age. Gramsci highlighted the degree to which ideology is embedded at every level in the society, in its art and literature, in its education system and mass media, in everyday language and popular culture. This bourgeois hegemony, Gramsci insisted, could only be challenged at the political and intellectual level, which means through the establishment a rival proletarian hegemony based on socialist principles, values, and theories. The capacity of capitalism to achieve stability by manufacturing legitimacy was also a particular concern of the Frankfurt School, a group of mainly German neo-Marxists who fled to the Nazis and later settled in the United States. Its most widely known member, Herbert Marcuse, argued in the One Dimension Man, which was written in 1964, that advanced industrial society has developed a totalitarian character in the capacity of ideology to manipulate thought and deny expression to oppositional views. By manufacturing false needs and turning humans into voracious consumers, modern society are able to paralyze criticism through the spread of widespread and stultifying affluence. According to Marcus, even the apparent intolerance of liberal capitalism serves a repressive purpose in that it creates the impression of free debate and argument, thereby concealing the extent in which the totalitarian and ideological control take place. Non-Marxist views. Okay. Non-Marxist views is one of the earliest attempts to construct a non-Marxist concept of ideology was undertaken by the German socialist Karl Mannheim. He was born in 1893 and died in 1947. Like Marx, He acknowledged that people, ideas, and shaped by their social circumstances. But in contrast to Marx, he strove to rid ideology to its negative implications. In Ideology and Utopia, which is a book written by him, Mannheim portrayed ideologies as thought systems that serves to define a particular social order and that broadly express the interest of dominant or ruling group. Utopias, on the other hand, are idealized representation of the future that imply that the need of radical social change invariably servicing the interest of oppressed or subordinate groups. He further distinguished between particular and total conceptions of ideology. Particular ideologies are the ideas and beliefs of specific individuals, groups, or parties, while total ideologies encompass the entire Weltanschauung or world's view of social class, society, or even historical period. In this case, Marxism, liberal capitalism, and Islamic fundamentalism can each be regarded as total ideologies. Mannheim nevertheless held that all ideological systems, including utopias, are distorted, because each offers a partial and necessarily self interested view of social reality. However, he argued that the attempt to uncover objective truth need not to be abandoned together. According to Mannheim, objectivity is strictly the preserve of the socially unattached intelligentsia, a class of intellectual who alone can engage in disciplined and dispassionate inquiry because they have so no economic interest of their own. The subsequent career of concept was marked deeply by the emergence of totalitarian dictatorships in the interwar period and by the heightened ideological tensions of the Cold War of the 1950s and 1960s. Liberal theorists in particular portrayed that regimes that developed in fascist Italy, Nazi Germany, and Stalinist Russia are historically new and uniquely oppressive systems of rule, and highlighted the role played by official ideologies in suppressing debate and criticism and promoting regime-related obedience. Writers as different as Karl 1945, Hannah Arendt 1951, Jalen Talman 1952, and Bernard Crick 1962. And the end of ideology, theorists examined in chapter 12, came to use the term ideology in a highly restrictive manner, seeing fascism and communism as its prime example. According to this usage, ideologies are closed systems of thought, which by claiming a monopoly of truth refuse to tolerate opposing ideas and rival beliefs. Ideologies are thus secular religions. They possess a totalizing character and serve an instrument of social control, ensuring compliance and subordination. However, not all political creeds are ideologies by which standard. For instance, liberalism, based as it is on the fundamental commitment to freedom, tolerance, and diversity, is the clearest example of an open system of thought, which was written by Popper in 1945. A distinctively conservative concept of ideology can also be identified. This is based on a long standing conservative distrust of abstract principles and philosophies, born out of a skeptical attitude towards the rationalism and progress. The world is viewed as infinitely complex and largely beyond the capacity of human mind to fathom. The foremost modern exponent of this view was Michael Oxford, and in Political Activity, Oxford, which is a book, Political Activity, Oxford argued in Rationalism in Politics, men sail a boundless and bottomless sea. From this perspective, ideologies are seen an abstract system and thought, sets of ideas that are destined to simplify and desert social realities because they claim to explain what is frankly incomprehensible. Ideology is thus equated with dogmatism, fixed or doctrine beliefs that are divorced from the complexities of the real world. Conservatives have therefore rejected the ideological style of politics based on attempts to reshape the world in accordance with a set of abstract principles or pre-established theories, until infected by the highly ideological politics of the new right. Conservatives had referred to adopt what Oakeshott called a traditionalist stance, which spurns ideology in favor of pragmatism and looks to experience and history as the surest guide to human conduct. Since the 1960s, however, the term ideology has gained a wider currency through being refashioned according to the needs of conventional social and political analysis. This has established ideology as a neutral and objective concept. The political baggage once attached to it have been removed. Martin Seligger in 1976, for example, detained an ideology as a set of ideas by which men posit, explain, and justify the ends and means of organized social action, irrespective of whether such action aims to be persevere, amend, uproot, or rebuild a given social order. An ideology is therefore an action oriented system of thoughts. So defined, ideologies are neither good nor bad, nor true nor false, open nor closed, liberating nor oppressive. They can be all of these things. The clear merit of this social scientific concept is that it is inclusive in the sense that it can be applied to all isms, to liberalism as well as Marxism, to conservatism as well as fascism, and so on. The drawback of any negative concept of ideology is that it is highly restrictive. Marx saw liberal and conservative ideas as ideological but regarded his own as scientific. Liberals classify communism and fascism as ideologies but refuse to accept that liberalism is also one. Traditional conservatives condemn liberalism. Marxism and fascism is ideological, but portray conservatism as merely a disposition. However, any neutral concept of ideology also has its dangers. In particular, in offloading its political baggage, the term may be rendered so bland and generalized that it loses its critical edge completely. If ideology is interchangeable with terms such as belief system, world's view, doctrine, or political philosophy, what is the point of continuing to pretend that it has a separate and distinct contours of ideology? Page 4. Any short or single sentence definition of ideology is likely to provoke more questions than it answers. Nevertheless, it provides a useful and necessary starting point. In this book, ideology is understood as the following. The definition of ideology. An ideology is a more or less coherent set of ideas that provides the basis for organized political action, whether this is intended to pursue or modify or overthrow the existing system of power. All ideologies therefore have the following features. First point, offer an account of its existing order, usually in the form of a worldview. Second point, advance a model of a desired future, a vision of the good society. Point 3. Third point, explain how political change can and should be brought about, how to get from A to B, or how to get it, how to get from the critique of existing order to the vision of future society. This definition is neither original nor novel and is entirely in line with the social scientific usage of the term. It nevertheless draws attention to some of the important and distinctive features of the phenomenon of ideology. Figure 1.1, which is the features of ideology. There are three circles. First circle is the critique of existing order. Second circle is the vision of future society. And the third circle is theory of political change. All the three circles are overlapping with each other. Figure 1.1 over. Continue. Now, in particular, it emphasizes that the complexity of ideology derives from the fact that it standardizes the conventional boundaries between descriptive and normative thoughts, and between political theory and political practice. Ideology, in short, brings about two kinds of statistics. which is the between understanding and commitment and between thought and action. Fusing understanding and commitment. In relation to the first synthesis, ideology blurs the distinction between what is and what should be. Ideologies are descriptive in that, in effect, they provide individuals and groups with an intellectual map of how their society works and, more broadly, which is a general view of the world. This, for instance, helps to explain the important integrative capacity of ideology, its ability to situate people within a particular social environment. However, such descriptive understanding is deeply embedded between a set of normative or prescriptive beliefs, both about the adequacy of the present social arrangement and about the nature of any alternative or future society. Ideology, therefore, has a powerful emotional or affective character. It is the means of expressing hopes and fears, sympathies and hatred, as well as of articulating beliefs and understanding. As critique of existing order and vision of future society are linked, facts and ideologies inevitably tend to merge into and become confused with values. One of the implications of this is that no clear distinctions can be made between ideology and science. In this light, it is helpful to treat ideologies as paradigms, in the sense of employed by the Thomas Kuhn in The Structure of Scientific Revolution, which was written in 1962, the book The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Kuhn defined a paradigm as the entire constellation of beliefs, values, techniques, and so on shared by members of a given community. In effect, it constitutes a framework within which the search for political knowledge takes place, a language of political disclosure. For instance, much of academic political science and still more clearly mainstream economics draws on individualist and rationalist assumptions that have an unmistakable liberal heritage. The notion of ideology as an intellectual framework or political language is also important because it hides the depth of an ideological structure human understanding. The tendency to deny that one's own beliefs are ideological bracket often while condemning other people of community precisely this sin bracket close can be explained by the fact that in providing the very concept through which the world becomes intelligible, our ideology is effectively invisible. We fail or refuse to recognize that we look at the world through a veil of theories, presuppositions, and assumptions that shape that we see and thereby impose meaning on the world. As Gramsci pointed out, ideology comes to assume the status of common sense. Now, fusing thought and action. The second synthesis, the fusion of thought and action, reflected in the linkage between B and C in the list above, is no less significant. Seliger in 1976 drew attention to this when referring to what is called the fundamental and operative levels of ideology. At a fundamental level, ideologies resemble political philosophies in they deal with the abstract ideas and theories and their propositions philosophies in that they deal with abstract ideas and theories and their proponent may times seem to be engaged in dispassionate inquiry. Although the term ideologue is often reserved for crude or self-conscious supporters of particular ideologies, respected political philosophers such as John Locke and John Stuart Mill and Friedrich Hayek each worked within and contributed to ideological traditions. At an operative level, however, ideologies take from the broad political movement engaged in popular mobilization and the struggle for power. Ideology in this guise may be expressed in sloganizing political rhetoric, party manifestos, and government policies. While ideologies must, strictly speaking, be both idea oriented and action oriented, Certain ideologies are undoubtedly stronger on one level than the other. For instance, fascism has always emphasized operative goals, and if you like the politics of the dead, anarchism, on the other hand, especially since the mid 20th century, has largely survived as at a fundamental or philosophical level. Nevertheless, ideologies invariably lack the clear shape and internal consistency of political philosophies. They are only more or less coherent. This apparent shapelessness stems in part from the fact that ideologies are not hermetically sealed systems of thought. Rather, they are typically fluid sets of ideas that overlap with the other ideologies and shade into one another. This not only fosters ideological development but also leads to the emergence of hybrid ideological forms such as liberal conservatism, socialist feminism, and conservative nationalism. Moreover, each ideology contains a range of divergent, even rival traditions and viewpoints. Not uncommonly, disputes between supporters of the same ideology are more passionate and bitter than the arguments between the supporters of rival ideologies. Because what is at stake in the true nature of ideology? In question, what is true socialism, true liberalism, or true anarchism? Such conflicts, both between and within ideological traditions, are made more confusing by the fact that they are often played out with the use of some same political vocabulary, each with their own meaning. Aside investing terms such as freedom, democracy, justice, and equality. This highlights the problem of W.B. Galley, born in 1955. Such deep controversies that no settled or agreed definition can ever be developed. In this sense, the concept of ideology is certainly essentially consisted, as indeed and the other terms examined in the perspective on boxes found in this book. Clearly, however, there must be limit to the incoherence or shapelessness of ideologies. There must be a point at which abandoning a particularly cherished principle or embracing a previously derided theory, an ideology loses its identity or perhaps is absorbed into a rival ideology. Could liberalism remain liberalism if its abandonment is commitment to liberty? Would socialism any longer be socialism if it is developed an appetite for violence and war? One way of dealing with this problem following Michael Frieden in 1996 is to highlight the morphology, the form and structure of an ideology in terms of its key concepts. In the same way that the arrangement of furniture in a room helps in us to distinguish between a kitchen, a bedroom, a lounge, and so on. Each ideology is therefore characterized by a cluster of core, adjacent, and peripheral concepts, not all of which need to be present for a theory or a doctrine to be recognized as belonging to that ideology. A kitchen, for instance, does not cease to be a kitchen simply because the sink or the cooker is removed. Similarly, a kitchen remains a kitchen over time despite the arrival of new inventions such as dishwashers and microwave ovens. However, ideologies may be thick or thin in terms of the extent of their conceptual furniture. Whereas liberalism, conservatism, and socialism are based on a broad and distinctive set of values, doctrines, and beliefs, others, such as anarchism and feminism, are more thin centered, often having a cross cutting character in what they incorporate elements from thicker ideological traditions. This also explains why there is a perhaps unresolvable debate and confusion about whether nationalism and multiculturalism, in particular, are ideologies in their own right or merely embellishments to other host ideologies. you know but what does this tell us about the relationship between ideology and truth and ideology, truth, and power? Page 5. For Marx, as we have seen, ideology was the implacable enemy of truth. Falsehood is implicit in ideology because, being the creation of the ruling, its purpose is to disguise exploitation and oppression. Nevertheless, as Mannheim recognized, to follow Marx in believing the pluralist needs no illusion or ideology is to accept a highly romanticized view of the working masses as the emancipators of humankind. However, Mannheim's own solution to his problem, a fate in free floating intellectuals does not get up much further. All people's views are shaped, consciously or subconsciously, by broader social and cultural factors. And while education may enable them to defend these views more fluently and persuasively, there is a little evidence that it makes those views more any less subjective or any more dispassionate. This implies that there exists no objective standard of truth against which ideologies can be judged. Indeed, to suggest that ideologies can be deemed to be either true or false is to miss the vital point that they embody values, dreams, and aspirations that are by their very nature not susceptible to scientific analysis. No one can prove that one theory of justice is preferable to any other, any more than rival conceptions of human nature can be tested by surgical intervention to demonstrate one and for all that human being possesses rights, are entitled to freedom, or are naturally selfish or naturally sociable. Ideologies are embraced less because they stand up to scrutiny and logical analysis, and more because they help individuals, groups, and socialists to make sense of the world in which they live. As Andrew Vincent in 1995 put it, we examine ideology as fellow travelers, not as neutral observers. Now, nevertheless, ideologies undoubtedly embody a claim to uncover truth. In this sense, they can seem as regimes of truth by providing us with language of political discourse, a set of assumptions and presumptions about how society does and should work. Ideology structures both what we think and what we act. As a regime and truth, ideology is always linked to power. In a world of competitive truth, values, and theories, ideologies seek to prioritize certain values over others and to invest legitimacy in particular theories or sets of meaning. Furthermore, as ideologies provide intellectual maps of social world, they help to establish the relationship between individuals and groups on the other hand, and the larger structure of power of the other. Ideologies therefore play a crucial role in either upholding the prevailing power structure bracket by portraying it as fair, natural, rightful, or whatever bracket closed, or in weakening or challenging it by highlighting its iniquities or injustices, and by drawing attention to the attractions of alternative power for old question mark. Ideology may have been an inseparable feature of politics since the late 18th century bracket. It is often traced back to 1789 French Revolution bracket closed, but its content has changed significantly over time, with the rate of ideological transformation having accelerated since the 1960s. New ideologies have emerged, some once potent ideologies have faded in significance, and all ideologies have gone through a process of sometimes radical redefinition and renewal. Political ideology arose out of a transition from feudalism to industrial capitalism. In simple terms, the earliest or classical ideology tradition, liberalism, conservatism, and socialism, developed as contrasting attempts to shape emergent industrial society. While liberalism championed the cause of the individualism, the market, and initially at least minimal government, conservatism stood in defense of an increasingly embattled ancient regime, and socialism advanced the quite different vision of a society based on community, equality, and cooperation. As the 19th century progressed, each of these ideologies acquired a clearer doctrinal character and came to be associated with a particular social class or stratum of society. Simply put, liberalism was the ideology of the rising middle class, conservatism was the ideology of aristocracy or nobility, and socialism was the ideology of growing working class. In turn, political parties developed to articulate the interest of these classes and to give operative expression to the various ideologies. These parties therefore typically had a programmatic character. The central theme that emerged from the ideological argument and debate during the period was the battle between two rival economic philosophies, capitalism and socialism. Political ideology thus has a strong economic focus. This was captured by the left right divide and expressed through an linear political spectrum. The battle lines between capitalism and socialism were significantly
sharpened by the 1917 Russian Revolution, which created the world's first socialist state. Indeed, throughout what is sometimes called the short 20th century, from the outbreak of the First World War in 1914 to the collapse of the communism in 1989 to 1991, particularly during the Cold War period from 1945 to 1990. International politics was structured along the ideological lines as the capitalist West confronted the communist East. More generally, left wing political ideas reflected a distaste of capitalism ranging from hard left communism and anarchism, desire to abolish and replacing capitalism, to a soft side, which was soft left, socialism and modern liberalism, wish to reform or humanize capitalism. Right wing ideas, which was classical liberalism and conservatism, by contrast, were defined by the desire to defend or extend capitalism. These ideological battle lines were nevertheless made more complicated by the rise of fascism in the 1920s and 1930s. On the face of it, fascism was clearly a far right ideology. It was fiercely anti communist and shared with conservatism, albeit in a more extreme form, a sympathy for hierarchy and elitism. However, radical elements within fascist movement sometimes leftist views in criticizing capitalism by and its big business. Fascism also gave expression to ideologically new ideas such as anti Westernism and politico spiritual renewal, which were later to see surface in the certain forms of religious fundamentalism. A further complication was the communist and fascist regimes exhibited certain similarities, both developing repressive and authoritarian forms of political rule, which some described as totalitarian. This brought the left right divide and the linear political spectrum into question. During the 1950s and 1990s, it became an increasingly common to use an alternative horseshoe shaped political spectrum, which indicated that the extreme points on the left and the right tended to converge, distinguishing both forms of the democratic beliefs of liberalism, socialism, and conservatism. However, since around the 1960s, the ideological landscape has been transformed. Not only have a major changes occurred to the established or classical ideologies, for instance, in the rise of the new left, the new right, and the most dramatically with the collapse of orthodox communism, but a series of new ideological traditions have also emerged. The most significant of these are set out. The designation of these ideologies as new can be misleading, as each of them has roots and stretch back to the 19th century, if not beyond. Moreover, they also tended to draw heavily on existing mainstream ideologies, giving them typically a hybrid or cross cutting character. Nevertheless, these ideologies are new in the sense that they have been particular areas of ideological debate, a prominence they never previously enjoyed, and in the process, they have fostered the emergence of fresh and challenging ideological perspectives. Why has this process of ideological transformation occurred? Question mark. The three main factors are the following. Point 1. The emergence of post-industrial societies and new social movement. Point 2. The collapse of communism and its changing world order. Point 3. The rise of globalization and of cosmopolitan sensibilities. Now table, which is figure number 1.5. What is classical and new ideologies? Example of classical ideologies are liberalism, conservatism, socialism, nationalism, anarchism, and fascism. Example of new ideologies are feminism, ecologism, religious fundamentalism, and multiculturalism. Table closed. Now, the structure and nature of modern societies have undergone a profound process of change since about the 1950s. Social thinkers have heralded this change in a variety of ways. For example, Beck in 1992 proclaimed that transition from the first to the second modernity. In 1994, Giddens analyzed the shift from simple to reflective modernity. while Bauman in 2000 discussed the change from solid to liquid modernity. At the heart of these changes, however, is the transition from industrial societies to post industrial ones. Industrial society tended to be solidaristic in that they were based on the relatively clear class divisions bracket, crudely those between capital and labor bracket closed, which in turn helped to structure the political process, including the party systems, interest group competition, and ideological debate. Post industrial societies are different in terms of the ways they tend, in the first place, to be more affluent societies in which the struggle for material subsistence has become less pressing for a growing proportion of people. In conditions of wider prosperity, individuals express more interest in quality of life or post material issues. These are typically concerned with morality and political justice and personal fulfillment, and include issues such as gender equality, world peace, cultural recognition, environmental protection, and animal rights. Second, the structure of society and the nature of social connectedness have altered, whereas industrial societies tended to generate thick social bonds based on social class and nationality in particular. Post industrial societies tend to be characterized by growing individualization and thinner and more fluid social bonds. This has been reflected in the growth of so called new social movements, such as the women movement, the environmental or green movement, and the peace movement, which has played a key role in the reshaping political identities and articulating new ideological agendas. The ideological ramifications of the collapse of communism has been profound and wide-ranging and in many ways continue to unfold. The ideology most clearly affected has been socialism, revolutionary socialism, especially in its Soviet cycle. Soviet style Marxist Leninist guise was revealed as a spent force, both because of the economic fallings of the center planning and because of the systems associated with the state authorization. However, democratic socialism has also been affected. Some argue that it has been fatally compromised. In particular, democratic socialists have lost faith in top down state control and have come to accept the market as the only reliable means of generating wealth. The collapse of communism and the general retreat from socialism has provided opportunities for new ideological forces. Chief among these has been nationalism, particularly ethnic nationalism, which has been displaced Marxism Leninism as the leading ideology in many post communist states, and religious fundamentalism, which in its various forms has been profound significance in the developing world. The advent of the global terrorism through the attacks on New York and Washington on 11th September 2001 and the initiation of the so called war on terror have been further consequences for political ideologies. The war on terror highlighted the emergence of the new ideological battle lines that some believe may define global politics in the 21st century. In the widely discussed of highly controversial thesis of Samuel Huntington, the ideological battle between capitalism and communism has been displayed by a clash of civilizations, in which the most significant division is between Islam and the West. Globalization is not a single process but a complex of processes, sometimes overlapping and interlocking, but also at times contradictory and oppositional ones. In its economic, cultural, and political forms, globalization forges connections between previously unconnected people, communists, institutions, and societies. This interconnectedness, however, had been sharply contrasting implications. On the other hand, it has been simulated homogenizing trends that has been flattening out of economic, cultural, and other differences between the countries and the regions of world. In ideological terms, this homogenizing has turned trend had been closely associated with the advance of liberalism, whether in form of a liberal economic order bracket based on free trade and free market bracket closed, the spread of liberal democracy, or the growth of cosmopolitan sensibilities often linked to the idea of human rights. However, on the other hand, globalization has been distinctively asymmetrical process that have been spawned new forms of inequality and generated a range of oppositional forces. These include the strengthening of religious fundamentalism in the developing world, leading, as Benjamin Barber in 1995 put it, to a confrontation between jihad and the Mac world and the emergence of